Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 21st January 2024. My name is TSV Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. Hardan, 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 Haribol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been trying to glean the knowledge and information that we glean through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been trying to do in all my previous videos. Kindly subscribe to this particular blog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my previous, present, and future videos. So let us continue with the topic of discussion for today's video. In my past few videos, we have been trying to find out what goes on into the mind of those ordinary human living entities who on an average belong to the 75% multitude of this society in any given lifetime in this material world, but who are attracted towards the dark negative forces that make up the 20% bracket of humanity in this society at a given lifetime. However, though these guys are attracted towards it, they lack the necessary qualifications to become a genuine member of this 20% bracket of those who have a purpose to achieve in the dark negative forces of this material world. It is these unfortunate living entities who have invariably to sail in two different boats. One is the one in which they originally belong, that is, the 75% category of average vegetative, mundane like human living entities, and the second boat, which is not accessible to them yet, but in which they keep a toehold to one day or the other climb into that boat. In such a case, they come to a very unenviable position called fringe or twilight zone. Those human living entities who belong neither to the original category nor to the 20% category. In such cases, these people are at best used by both categories, where the 75% category tries to forget about them and the 20% category tries to forsake them or vice versa. The 75% forsakes them and the 20% forgets them. However, this does not stop the unscrupulous 20% category to exploit these people in the fringe for their own nefarious, selfish benefits. And at the same time, many persons from the 75% category try to make the best out of the situation into which these people from the fringe part belong or where they find themselves in. How this happens, we shall discuss here. As I mentioned before, these guys have a very unenviable position. We are trying to look into the minds of such characters to find out how and why they feel that they belong to this twilight zone. In this process, we have been trying to discuss some case histories at length to understand the minds of such human living entities better. In that process, in my previous two videos, we talked about one pimp come pork butcher called Roland Legrand, who used to solicit customers, especially in the 20% bracket, for his own girlfriend and wife. This shows that this guy had a very unscrupulous, attracted towards the senses type of mind. His mind operated on the vibrations caused by his etheric body of senses, especially lust, sex, and greed. For money, this guy did not have the character to go straight, but to solicit his own girlfriend and wife to make some extra buck for himself and his girlfriend. This guy who was trying to curry favor from the 20% bracket of the dark negative forces one day came to know about a like minded individual in his own twilight zone called Papillon Roger, who went by that nickname in the Parisian underworld in the early 20th century of France. This Roland Legrand came to know through some opportunity or some event that this very Papillon Rocher was being exploited by the cops of the Parisian government to work as their own star informer against the Parisian underworld. Papillon Roger was a cut above this pimp and pawns called Roland Legrand. He had probably more talent and more courage than Roland Legrand and probably more capability. However, one day he came to know that this Roland Legrand was spreading rumors in the underworld that there was one guy called Papillon Roger who was working as a police informer. To stop this Roland Legrand from spreading such rumors, Papillon Roger shot Roland Legrand once in his belly to warn him against spreading such rumors. However, Roland survived this attack, went to the hospital, and fingered at Papillon Roger as the one who shot him. We have tried to discuss this particular case history in detail in my past two videos. We later came to know about one gentleman called Henry Sherrier who was given a life imprisonment in a penal settlement called French Guiana during this period, and he was deported there. This Henry Sherrier escaped his conviction 13 years later and relocated to a city called Caracas in Venezuela, where he did some lucrative business. However, during an earthquake, this particular business was lost and razed to the ground, as a result of which this Henry Sherrier was left high and dry. At that time, he wrote a book on his own life, an autobiographical novel called Papillon, in which he claimed that he was known as Papillon in the French underworld and that he was wrongfully convicted for the shooting incident of Roland Legrand and imprisoned into this penal settlement as a result. We all know the details of this whole incident from our previous videos. However, when this book was released, it immediately became a raging hit, especially in the French literary cycles or circles. One of the top writers or authors in France during that period was known as André Malraux. This André Malraux was so surprised on reading this book that he openly declared, "This Henry Sherrier is a literary genius. This intrigues every student of mind in this material world." We cannot understand how an ordinary guy who spent most of his time in the fringe or twilight zone of the Parisian underworld and who spent 13 years in the criminal penal settlement of France and later as an ordinary businessman could write such a brilliant book, a book which became such a rage that it resulted in the closing down of penal settlements in Europe, especially in France. We cannot understand how such a person with such a background could write so well. To cap it all, though Papillon became a raging hit by the time he was in his early 60s, in 1971 he wrote another book called Banco, which was a prelude to his original book called Papillon. In Banco, he gave a fairly good idea of his own background, which gave us an insight into the mind of this particular human living entity who was an underworld figure or a fringe figure turned convict, turned businessman, and ultimately the writer of a bestseller. Here I would hasten to add that both books written by Papillon were actually autobiographical. Hence, probably this could have been a reason for his writing such an enlightening book. But at the same time, we should appreciate that there are several equally or more deserving human living entities in this society who want to become writers and poets or painters, sculptors, etc., but who have to go through the grind a lot to succeed in publishing even one of the articles let alone a book. If such was the case, what was the background of Hari Sharir which made him such a literary genius? To see this, we delved into his past to find out how and why his mind worked the way it did. So let us begin. Henry Sharir was born on 16th November 1906 in the province of Ardèche in France to two school teachers, both father and mother. This guy was the only son in the family with two elder sisters. As a result of this, both his elder sisters and his own mother pampered this boy silly. So the roots for this guy's future life were sown, or the seeds for his future lives were sown by his own mother and sisters, so that soon this guy turned out to be an incurable spoilt brat. This shows how his mind began working. This shows that when you shower undeserved love and affection on any human living entity in his or her childhood, and if that person's mind is just pliable like clay, it can be molded into an attraction for the dark, negative forces of this material world. This vouches for our observation that many of those who are attracted towards the dark, negative forces of this material world come here not advertently but inadvertently, by default and not by design, by chance and not deliberately, unknowingly and not knowingly. In fact, these guys' mind works in such a manner that even before they or their own kith and kin realize it, these guys drift down the gutter towards the dark negative forces in such a way that as far as they are concerned, it is quite difficult to return to the common 75% multitude or to try to go to the 5% bracket of chosen ones. Anyway, this particular Henry Sharir was in for a shock when his own mother took to the bed and died when he was 12 years old. This shock was unbearable and it left him totally injured, both mentally and cerebrally. He had a hit to such an extent that he stopped believing in God and he sincerely started thinking that this was some gross injustice to him and his own life. This also had a side effect. Now, Papillon or Henry Sherrier became slowly jealous of all those 12 and 13-year-olds who had their mothers alive and who continued to pamper their own offsprings. This put this 12-year-old Henry Schreier into trouble and he was often into several fights with those innocent boys who could not understand why Henry Schreier was angry or upset with them. Things came to a head when one day he took a geometry box compass and plunged it into the heart of another child of his own age. This was so severe that Henry Sherrier was promptly arrested and put to the juvenile delinquency school. This was because this boy, despite his young age, had committed a serious illegal offense. When this guy, who was still now an ordinary school student, landed up in this juvenile delinquency school, he got his first taste of the dark negative forces of this material world. Here he was face to face not only with like minded youth but also with very sadistic cops which gave him a lifelong loathing for authority, especially legal ones. This guy went through a lot of physical abuse, which instead of straightening him up, hardened him yet to such an extent that he became an incorrigible person in even that delinquency school. This shows how and why the very pliable mind of a young boy can be molded in such a way that he or she ends up thinking negative and destructive. After remaining in this school for a couple of years, Papillon or Henry Sherrier, which was his original name, got illegally or through default qualified to join the French Navy so that something good could be brought out from him. This guy was enrolled into the French Navy. This is all I wanted to talk about in this particular video. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this particular case history. Please give me your own expert views, thoughts, ideas, and opinions so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me tell you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.